An 82-game regular season has been the norm in the NBA for the better part of 5 decades now. In a season where action takes place every night, even the most dramatic of moments can be fleeting, especially in today's age of social media where it's all about clicks and impressions before our brains starve for the next piece of content. Rightfully, and fairly so, the greatest NBA moments belong to the finals and the postseason, where our heroes duke it out for glory in the lore of this beautiful game. In today's episode, we continue our series of Random Game Rewind, where we hop in the NBA time machine and take a visit to some of the forgotten games from regular season history and analyze how they've gone on to affect the grand scheme of the league. Today, pack your winter gear, bundle up, and join me as we take a short trip back to a cold February night in Cleveland just 5.5 years ago. This is Once Upon a Dribble. Welcome in and welcome back to the second episode in our new series called Random Game Rewind, where, as mentioned, we take a look back at some of the greatest yet forgotten games in NBA history and analyze how they've gone to affect things. Today, we are taking a look at two of the bigger stars in our game. 2 years before LeBron James and Jimmy Butler would square off in the 2020 NBA Finals, they put on a big-time show in a random regular season game just 2 years prior to their championship tilt in the bubble in Orlando. This was a show in which both players would go for 35-plus points in an overtime slugfest in which they'd both log 46-plus minutes. Let's give some background before hopping into the game. The 2017-2018 season was a turning point for both players. Jimmy's time as a Chicago Bull came to an end in the summer of 2017. Jimmy was rapidly ascending to stardom as Chicago was heading in the opposite direction. In a blockbuster deal on June 22nd of 2017, Butler was traded along with the rights to Justin Patton to the Minnesota Timberwolves in exchange for Zach LaVine, Chris Dunn, and the rights to Lauri Markkanen, who was the 7th pick in the 2017 draft. The idea of a vet star in Jimmy, now entering his 7th season, joining forces with a young, talented, yet ultimately unproven and raw Timberwolves team led by Karl Anthony Towns and Andrew Wiggins, seemed like a genius pairing. The Wolves, despite their potential, hadn't really made relevant contender noise since Kevin Garnett last resided in Minnesota. They had All-NBA big man Kevin Love, but failed to put a contending team around him just a few years prior. Now, with a big three of their own entering 2018, the outlook was bright. Despite the Warriors being heavy, and I mean heavy, favorites in the Western Conference, Minnesota was still predicted to be a top 5 to 6 seed in a very competitive conference. Before all the drama that surrounded Jimmy's departure from Minnesota, the team did see some immediate success. In conjunction with a uniform and logo rebrand, the new look roster in Minnesota made noise right away. With a win over Portland in mid-January, the Wolves found themselves at 29-16, which is about a 53 to 54 win pace over an 82-game regular season, and had the 3rd seed in the West. Now, while they wouldn't hold on to that 3rd spot for very long, the team did maintain a solid grip on the 4th seed and potential home court in the first round through the first 3.5 months of the season. A few weeks later, they were still cruising along, sitting at 34-22, and specifically 32-18 when Jimmy Butler was active. Despite some supposed personality friction between Butler and the rest of the young core, vibes were great for the Minnesota faithful. The Wolves were gearing up for the All-Star break when they had a seemingly nondescript Wednesday night game in Cleveland. Jimmy, who would be selected an All-Star for the West, was averaging 22, 5, and 5, while fellow All-Star Karl Anthony Towns was putting up great numbers himself to the tune of 20 points per game and 12 rebounds. They came across a Cleveland team that was having an interesting season, to say the least. On the other side of this player matchup is LeBron James. 2018 was significant for him and the Cavaliers, as just like the Wolves, in addition to a logo and uniform overhaul, had a completely different roster than the one that made the finals the year prior and won the whole thing just 2 years prior. The roster was without LeBron's running mate Kyrie Irving, who had spent 6 seasons with Cleveland as he was traded for a variety of reasons that could fill its own video. He was sent to Boston for All-NBA guard Isaiah Thomas, who was coming off of one of the greatest modern scoring seasons for a guard ever, but someone also in the midst of some serious health issues. Now, while IT wouldn't work out for the Cavs, they also brought in Dwayne Wade, Derrick Rose, Jay Crowder, and some other fringe pieces to complement the remnants of the 2016 championship core. It was apparent from the get-go that the pieces brought in weren't who they once were, and despite some championship DNA from the likes of K-Love, J.R. Smith, and Tristan Thompson, this team was all about LeBron and where he could bring them in his 15th year at age 33. Before Cleveland overhauled their roster at the deadline, they saw a very roller coaster up and down first 3 months of the season. They got off to a scorching 23-8 start, including a stretch where they won 13 straight before entering a terrible slump at the start of the new year, where they went 7-14 to fall to 30-22 and clinging to the 3 seed by percentage points over Washington. Through the first 52 games of the season, LeBron was averaging his usual elite numbers of 26 points, 8 rebounds, and 9 assists on 54% shooting from the field. The Cavs were desperately looking for something, anything, to flip the momentum and change the trajectory of their once promising season as they entered this matchup versus the surging Wolves in early February. The first 2 quarters of this game went pretty much the way you'd expect a game in the booming three-point era to go, especially considering both teams weren't exactly defensive juggernauts. The first half saw the Wolves take a 66-64 lead, with both teams unconscious from the field. The Wolves were shooting 60% and 56% from 3, led by Jimmy, Cat, and Jeff Teague, who combined for 37 points on 13-17 shooting from the field. The Cavs were shooting nearly the exact same splits, 60% from the field and 57% from 3. LeBron had 12 points, 6 rebounds, and 3 assists on 6 of 9 shooting at half, but he wasn't the Cavs' leading scorer. At intermission, that was J.R. Smith, who was hot with 5 first-half threes. During the first half, LeBron grabbed a rebound that allowed him to pass Zydrunas Ilgauskas as the all-time Cavs rebounding leader, and is now the Cavs leader in points, rebounds, and assists all time. And he joins Michael Jordan and Kevin Garnett as the only players to lead their respective franchises in all 3 major categories. After the game, LeBron said, "Jordan and KG, so that's a pretty cool thing. I'm blessed and I've been fortunate enough to play this game at a high level for a long time." Now, halftime over. Cue the LeBron-Jimmy duel. The third quarter saw the Stars show out. Jimmy went for 14 points in the period on 6 of 8 shooting, while LeBron went for 13 on 5 of 5 shooting, including 5 assists. LeBron kicked off the duel with a 3 on the first possession of the half. Butler heaved up a 3 as the shot clock was expiring a little over a minute later, and we were off. Masterful scoring from both players, isolation, step-backs, threes, mid-range, finishing at the rim, slashing, scoring off ball, scoring out of the pick and roll, scoring in transition, in the half court. These guys were doing it all. This game was a pretty close contest throughout, mostly within one position for the majority of the game until we get to about 6 minutes left in the fourth quarter. A beautiful Kyle Korver 3 made it an 8-point game in favor of the Cavs, and it seemed they put the game away. But the Wolves went on a furious run to tie the game at 124 with about 2 minutes left, forcing a Cleveland timeout. Both LeBron and Jimmy were pretty quiet in the fourth quarter up to this point, but This is where the fireworks show starts. Cat drilled a 32-footer to take a 3-point lead with under a minute left. LeBron promptly answered with a dagger 3 of his own to knock the game at 129 apiece with 45 seconds left. In the waning seconds, Jimmy and LeBron would both miss shots to win the game, setting up overtime. Free basketball. Of the 20 total points scored in overtime, only 4 weren't scored by either LeBron or Jimmy. After a beautiful display of shot making once again from the two players for the majority of the extra period, the score was tied at 138. Jimmy drove to the left side and had a step on rookie Chetty Osman before pulling up for a short shot. However, James, who again had missed a 3-pointer that would have won the game in regulation, came from the weak side to reject it and set up a dramatic finish. Jimmy said after the game, "I just didn't see him. That's part of the game." 1 second, 1 shot, 1 player. And for one night, LeBron James made all of Cleveland's problems disappear.
Sure that your pass goes up front to give your guy a chance.
Green looking to the front court.
Here's LeBron.
James,
He
catch,
off.
fire, ball game! He did it! LeBron James wins it for Cleveland!
LeBron caught a long inbounds pass from Jeff Green, created some space from Butler near the foul line, and drilled the fadeaway over Jimmy Butler's outstretched hand as the buzzer sounded in overtime, giving the Cavs a cleansing 140-138 win. James said, "Once I caught it, I just trusted everything I've done in my career." The Quicken Loans Arena crowd erupted, and James was mobbed by teammates as the struggling Cavs, who had just won 7 of their last 20 games, finally had something to celebrate after weeks of tension and turmoil in a season that was slowly slipping away. Jimmy finished with 35. Karl Anthony Towns had 30 for the Wolves, who were in position to win in overtime before LeBron came to Cleveland's rescue. James finished with 37 points, 10 rebounds, and 15 assists in 48 minutes, as he has done so many times, and delivered one of those moments that has defined him. Coach Tom Thibodeau of the Minnesota Timberwolves said, "1 second in the game, it's a tough play, and he made a hell of a shot. You don't want to foul him, and I thought Cat had great pressure on the ball. LeBron was in command of the game offensively and handling the basketball. LeBron can read the game better than anyone in the league." LeBron's 2018 has gone down as one of the greatest clutch seasons of all time for its volume and its efficiency. NBA.com defines clutch time as the score being within 5 points with 5 minutes or less remaining in the fourth quarter or overtime. In 2017-2018, LeBron attempted 159 clutch field goal attempts, second only to Westbrook's 170. He converted on 87 of those, good for 54.7%. That mark was by far the best number of the 15 players with the most clutch field goal attempts in the 2018 season. Additionally, he made 33% of his threes, making his effective field goal percentage 60.4, the highest mark in the top 15. In fact, of all the players to attempt at least 60 clutch field goals that season, only 2 others eclipsed 60% effective field goal percentage: Giannis and rookie Jason Tatum, both of whom combined for only 144 attempts, 15 fewer than James himself. The season would go on for both teams, but in opposite directions. Shortly after, Jimmy would go down with a meniscus injury as the Wolves would limp to a 13-13 finish, even having to duel the Denver Nuggets on the final night of the regular season for the 8th seed. And despite making the playoffs, Jimmy just wasn't the same, and they fell in 5 games to one of the greatest teams of the modern era, the 65-win Houston Rockets. As with the Cavs, just a single day later, they completely renovated their roster by participating in 3 trades. One, a 3-teamer with Sacramento and Utah that sent out Jay Crowder and Derrick Rose and would net them George Hill and Rodney Hood. A second trade sent Isaiah Thomas, Channing Frye, and a 2018 first to LA for Jordan Clarkson and Larry Nance Jr. And finally, they sent Dwayne Wade, who was dealing with injuries, back to Miami. This game, and trade deadline proved to be a turning point for Cleveland as they'd finished the season going 20-10 to reach 50 wins, where they made one last surprise run to the finals in the LeBron era. LeBron's postseason is perhaps even more memorable than his regular season, where he would add 2 more buzzer beaters to his resume. His 3 in 2017-2018 was the most in a single season since Kobe in 2009-2010. He also had 8 40-point playoff games, an NBA record that tied Jerry West, who also had 8 40-point playoff games in 1965. Second place going to Michael Jordan, who had 7 40-point playoff games in 1989. All of this was enough to propel the Cavs to the finals, but not quite enough to overcome the greatest team ever assembled in Golden State. Fate had a hand in this matchup, perhaps. Jimmy would wind up in Miami the next season, while LeBron signed with the Lakers that summer. The result of this seemingly normal game in February of 2018 sent these 2 stars down a path that would eventually find them on opposite sides of the country in Los Angeles and Miami, spiraling towards their date with destiny in the NBA Finals just 2 years later. This has been another episode of Once Upon a Dribble. We thank you for listening in on this installment of Random Game Rewind. As always, we'd appreciate if you like, comment, and subscribe on our YouTube channel. And of course, subscribe wherever you listen to your podcast, whether that be Spotify, Apple, or anywhere else. Give us some feedback. You can find us on X, formerly Twitter, @OnceDribble. Give us some feedback. We'd love to hear what you guys want to hear next. We have a lot of stuff up in the pipeline. As usual, keep your eyes peeled, have that notification bell triggered, and we'll have some more stuff for you guys. And until then, this is Once Upon a Dribble, signing out.